All right, we are back with more college football coverage, and to get things started out, we have number 17 Texas Tech and 16 Utah together. This game was something that I expected to be truly intriguing. I mean, both of these teams, especially Utah, at least just rose up the ranks to start off the season with some dominant wins. And Texas Tech also has a very good shot at contending for conference championship, but to have this matchup between these two powerhouses in their own distinct ways earlier in the season like this was definitely going to be a huge roadblock for both sides. And it would be interesting to see how this would play out. For at least the first 3 quarters and some change, we would get that. Texas Tech started out the game as well as they could have, especially on the defensive front when you just take a look at this first drive. Utah's game plan this entire season has been to establish the run early and often. So you're typically going to see them on their early downs take as much yardage as they can possibly get on the first two to consistently get in third and manageable situations. And the fact that they were already limiting those gains consistently while forcing third and much longer than Utah would anticipate already put them in a grand position. They would force a 3 and out here, and they would get the ball back, find themselves in a very interesting situation though. Because for as much as their defense was keeping them in this game, the offense was mostly questionable to start things out. Especially when you look at their discipline. Because the first of their 6 false starts by a certain point in this ball game would be called on this drive, forcing them into a 3rd and 10 deep in their own territory. It felt as if they were not prepared for how loud it would get in Rice-Eccles Stadium in Utah. It's like you had to see that coming, but at some point, you've got to be able to overcome that. I don't care about that. You've got to try to grind it out. It's as simple as that, bro. However, on the next play, which was quite literally the biggest play of the game, this Williams running back out of the backfield for Texas Tech would instantly start to quiet that crowd down. He just got completely wide open out of the backfield because everybody was so focused on covering the deep play that they forgot to account for this running back. And he just runs all the way over to the left side of the field, breaks a few tackles, makes some extra moves, and all of a sudden, he gained fucking 73 yards, getting them into Utah's red zone on an electric fucking play. Now, they would be stymied for just a second, but Dickey, another one of their running backs, would get a 12-yard catch on 3rd down, doing everything in his power to shake off the defense before grinding out a conversion, and he would then punch it in for a touchdown to give the Red Raiders a 7-0 lead. The woes would continue for both teams. I mean, again, Utah would continue to struggle with establishing the run. And although they would get a 4th and manageable off of a Dampier scramble at the same time, the running back on this play just did a poor job of reading the gap. He had a completely different angle to exploit, and yet he chose the one that was being swarmed up by the defense. So naturally, they stopped him. But Texas Tech still couldn't do anything with that, as they would force a 3 and out. And you've got to credit Utah's defense just as equally. I mean, at any point they could have crumbled early in this ball game. But as I continue to reiterate, how many times was your offense going to fuck up? And how much more could you take on the defensive front of having to consistently roll back out on the field after all of these short offensive drives. At some point, it felt like they were going to break, but at least for a while, that wasn't looking like that was going to happen all too much. And again, the Utes did not make it easy. I mean, it did hurt them tremendously because on this next drive, Dampier had a fucking immaculate pass. It was kind of a jump pass, and they had their two-way player in Benny get a fucking touchdown off of that throw. But for whatever reason, the lineman was all the way down the field trying to block, and it got called back. Now, they would get a first down anyways off of a separate penalty on the Red Raiders defense. But then you get yourself into a spot where you fumble the ball on back-to-back plays. Now, the first one makes a little bit of sense because the option was ill-timed, but this next one was just a tremendous fucking play because their linebacker, the Red Raiders linebacker, in Rodriguez, to start out this game, had been fucking everywhere, all over the field. And he found himself in the middle of another play, yet again, forcing the action as his teammate would recover the fumble and get a nice advantage in field position for his team. Within just a couple plays, though, the Utes would get the ball right back. Pass got tipped up, and Johnson would end up getting the interception within just 2 plays. But it gets even weirder. I mean, they would start to establish just a brief bit of running. But yet again, our man Rodriguez on this next drive would force yet another fumble with Holmes recovering it. The first quarter still would not end without madness, though. And I like, shit you not, both teams were just bending to the will of the defense at this point. I think that's the best way for me to describe it. Because you have that situation, but you would also, on first down, very next play for the Texas Tech offense, J.H. Daly on that defensive front would just completely bury Baron Morton in the backfield and force a sack fumble, setting them way, way behind schedule. And eventually they had to punt. But again, nothing would end up being made of it because of how inferior Utah's offense looked in this game. And still, the Utes defense was not relenting in their ability to stop them. Even though by a certain point in this game, they gave up a good chunk of 10-plus yard plays, they still were not breaking enough. I mean, for crying out loud, they get near Utah's red zone. Morton throws up a pass that looks to be completed, but you have this same player in Benet. He got the touchdown called back on him, but he quite literally snatched the touchdown away from the target, ripped it out of his hands, gets an interception for this defense yet again, and tries his best to set up the offense for success. Now, they move the ball a little bit here, but it's so slow. And again, that's kind of the way the Aggies were playing them, Red Raiders were playing them in this one. Keep all the passes short. Don't allow too many explosive plays, and you're probably going to fare pretty well in this game. It's exactly what they would end up doing here. Despite them grinding out a few conversions, they still were forced to punt eventually. Same thing with the Utes defense, although again, there were a few big plays every now and then. When we got to crucial downs, that offensive line was crumbling under the pressure of both the fans in the stadium and the way that the front seven was playing them all game long to this point. But with a grand chance for Utah to do something before the end of the half, Dampier threw a pretty unexplainable interception. I don't know. I would legitimately not know how to defend that whatsoever. It was just a horrifically bad throw. And Pollock made him pay for it, to be honest with you. Completely rattled him all game long. Though again, credit to Utah, with them forcing another false start penalty and with them keeping the Texas Tech squad behind schedule somewhat, they would force them into kicking a 58-yard field goal. But Harrington made that shit though. And Utah would have their finest drive of the first half by far, getting themselves on the board with a field goal. Now again, they got bailed out with a few penalties, but they literally had to just chip away at it. Not a single play outside of one ended up coming over 10 or more yards for them. And it was like, dude, oh my goodness. That's just not okay. Now, the third quarter would see an interesting shift take place. Because the false start penalties were on fucking crack. Not only did Texas Tech have 2 on this drive, but they also had a personal foul penalty that set them back even further to start out this drive. And to make matters even worse for them, they came into this game as a top passing offense in the league, as a top scoring offense in the league. Yet for whatever reason, at multiple points, Baron Morton felt so much pressure that he felt the need to run and scramble for some reason, with that not being his game. Still, on this 2nd and 28, by the way, he would actually get a solid 10-yard gain, but Hall, who had been hard-hitting pretty much every ball carrier all game, did the same thing to Baron Morton. Now, initially they were checking to see if this was a targeting penalty, because from their perspective, they felt as though he led with the crown of his helmet into Baron Morton's body, essentially his back. And with it being more of the side upon further review, it wasn't targeting. But people were saying it was a dirty play, and Morton would actually be taken out of the game, unfortunately. So I don't know if there's an injury update on him right now. Hopefully he is in the best condition possible. In for him would come freshman Will Hammond, though. And he was put in a horrible situation. They would punt. I mean, there's not much you can do on 3rd and 23 in your own territory. But the Red Raiders defense would just constantly haunt down this Utes offense. And throughout the rest of this third quarter, man, they forced punt after punt after punt on them. It was a little touch and go for Hammond, though, as well. So Texas Tech would be in the same position. Despite him getting a few good completions, he actually was pretty accurate, completing a few of his first passing attempts in this game, including a nice fucking throw to Douglas in contested fashion, and a few solid gains as well. But they were always set back by some kind of penalty or some kind of miscue by a different entity on the team. Nevertheless, the fourth quarter would begin, and they would get a solid drive going. Virgil would get multiple catches in a row, including a beauty of a catch on the sideline. And you would have Hammond try to hit Douglas deep later in this drive. It was a beautiful pass by him, by the way, but Douglas dropped it. So you know what he does on the ensuing 3rd down? He goes right back to him in the same fashion, puts it right in the breadbasket, and Douglas manages to haul it in this situation. Man. They would get deeper and deeper into Utah territory. And then They had a chance to get a great touchdown pass, but they bungled it completely. I mean, Carter Jr. in this situation completely cooked the Utah defense on that route over to the corner of the end zone, to the point where he had multiple D-backs colliding with each other in coverage. He was as open as he possibly could be, and Hammond put it in a great position for him. He dropped it. He dropped it at a moment where Texas Tech could have taken so much momentum away from the Utes in this case. Quite literally fell right through his hands. Now, he would get on the board with a field goal, but the difference between that and a touchdown in this case would prove to be everything. Utah would hands down have their best drive of the game. Now, I hope that they got one of their larger plays to Bentley for a 44-yard gain, just rumbling and stumbling down the middle of the field. You would also have Wayshawn Parker get involved on multiple plays in this drive, and the former Washington State running back who transferred to Utah in offseason, I suppose, would punch it in for a 5-yard touchdown to make this a 3-point game all of a sudden. And I'm literally saying as much like, hey, we got a game now. It would be all Texas Tech from here. They just caught fire immediately. And honestly, at the halftime period, that's essentially what it was going to come down to. The second that some offense ended up hitting their stride, that would end up being the determining factor in this ball game. And right out the gates, you had Hammond get a fucking 32-yard scramble. You had him complete a nice pass over to Eakin for 19 yards. And then you had Carter Jr. redeem himself, trailing wide open in the left corner of the field. And he walked into the end zone untouched from 24 yards out. They would force another 3-and-out on the Utes, and they would go on another 7-play, 68-yard drive for a touchdown as he hit up Virgil again. And then Cameron Dickey was quite literally down within 2 plays. I mean, he was surrounded by so much defense to the point where they could have blown the play dead. But they let it play on, and he managed to bounce off all the blocks and tackle attempts, scattering over to the left side of the field for him and getting in for a 24-yard touchdown run to make this game 27-10. Following another interception by Dampier in this game, with Rodriguez making yet another play in this one. They would get a shorter but fortuitous touchdown drive, with Virgil getting another touchdown catch on the board for the team to make this game 34-10, which is what the final score would be. Like I said, man, Texas Tech suffocated that run game. And once they were able to do that, it worked to perfection. While they had a solid start to the season with the New Mexico transfer in Dampier, their performance was subpar in this game. I mean, they still managed to get 100 yards rushing, but to average just 3.3 yards per carry, and understanding that you were most always in third in unfavorable situations in this ball game, certainly had to hurt. Like, the conversion rate was certainly poor for them in this one. And at the end of the day, with Will Hammond just stepping in and having a masterful performance, they were able to overcome the early struggles that were kind of unexpected for this Texas Tech team and win. In this game, Hammond would have 169 yards on 81.2% completion and 2 touchdowns with 61 yards on the ground, adding another dimension to the game that Morton doesn't have with his dual threat ability. Now, Morton would do okay. I mean, they had the lead by the time he was out, but when he was healthy and playing, He had 2 interceptions and 142 yards. So do with that what you will. As for the rushing numbers, Williams had 114 combined yards, 43 rushing on 13 touches. As for Dickey, he had 13 rushes for 67 yards and 2 touchdowns. Virgil would have 72 receiving yards and a touchdown on 6 catches. Douglas would have 68 receiving yards on 4 catches, and Carter Jr. would have 49 receiving yards and a touchdown on 7 catches. As for Utah, Dampier would have 2 interceptions and 162 passing yards on 65.8% completion. But the yards per attempt reveal, again, everything that I've been saying when it comes to them making him as passive as possible. 4.3 yards per attempt. Yes, there were some inaccurate throws in there, but even then, the depth of some of these attempts were not too long. They just weren't at all. And when you can make a quarterback that uncomfortable, that scared in their position, get them out of their element like that, eventually it paid dividends for a Texas Tech team that was able to just win the entire battle. You know, they definitely took some punches of their own. Obviously a big punch in losing Morton, but they overcame it anyways. As for their receiving, Bentley would have 75 receiving yards on 6 catches. Davis would have 70 yards on 10 catches. And then no other player on this team had over 9 yards, with that being Wayshawn Parker out of the backfield. So that's a little bit of an issue. Now again, with some plays being called back, that probably hurt a little bit, but man, that is not optimal at all. Again, like I said, shout out to fucking Rodriguez for this Texas Tech squad. He was everywhere. A pass deflected, interception, 11 total tackles, in a couple forced fumbles. Insane game from him. And even though this was accrued with volume, how about Richie and Hall for the Utah defense, also tallying over 10 tackles a pop? All right. Moving on to, well, before doing that, should note that with this win right here, not only did Texas Tech secure their first win in a ranked matchup since 2008, which ended up being against Oklahoma State, they also secured their first 4-0 start since 2013. Now again, if they can maintain that throughout the course of the rest of the season, they've probably got a good shot of contending for the conference title. But we will see about it. All right, now moving on to Auburn, 22nd ranked Auburn, at 11th ranked Oklahoma. This is going to be the revenge game of all revenge games for Jackson Arnold coming into this one, at least in theory. The fact that you not only transferred from Oklahoma to Auburn in this offseason, but quite literally after you move on from them, they go out and they get the top-ranked transfer in material to replace you and try to go much further than they have as a collective team over the past few seasons since Caleb Williams is gone, honestly. Now is going to be his time to prove that they made the wrong decision. But honestly, it was a weird performance from him. It was a weird performance. Now again, when you look at the box score, you'll see that he was mostly accurate throughout this game. But at the same time, watching it, defense is the name of the game. So how funny is it that on a week in which I've explained how multiple defenses have shut down promising offenses in the NFL, and coming off of a game where both defenses canceled each offense out for at least most of the game, How ironic that the contributions in this game with this Sooners defense would turn up a whole different notch. Starting with this sack right here to force Auburn into a 3-and-out situation early. And all that is just one. Now, as for the Sooners here, my thing was that they would do a decent job of moving the ball. They would end up getting a field goal here. But they did a poor job of incorporating their running backs earlier in this ball game. Like, yeah, I get that Mateer is going to be the showcase. I get that you have Burks and Satania the third on the outside and Kanak at tight end. I understand that, but with this Auburn team, the way that they'd been running the football, you want to try to establish some continuity in those running backs. It felt like they couldn't be relied on to do anything at all. And no, it wouldn't come back to bite them just yet. You know, there were pockets in this game where they would desperately need their services, and they just wouldn't be doing much at all. It was weird to watch. They did get a little lucky on this drive as well, because I gotta note that. Full context. So Satania the third gets the ball on what I think was an RPO screen. He's trying to secure the catch. So again, the full act of a catch would be 1-2 step and a football move. He takes 1 step, he takes 2 steps, and then as he's about to make the football move, it gets punched out, or at least starts to get jarred out. He gets slung down to the ground. It pops out of his arm. It ends up being a fumble, and the Auburn defense recovers it, scores a touchdown. They take a long time to review the play because, granted, if Auburn does come away with a scoop six in that fashion to start the scoring in this game, that changes the entire complexity of the action to this point. However, again, with what I was saying, I guess refs took that into account, and they overturned the initial ruling of a fumble to a simple incomplete catch. Because again, if he completes that football move, then I can understand it being a fumble. But just as he was about to make it, they start jarring the ball loose. It was tight, so I guess I couldn't have really been mad if it would have stood as a fumble. Definitely hurt the Auburn defense, but again, credit to them, they were still able to hold and force Oklahoma into a field goal. And they would respond mightily. Now, they would get backed up tremendously with a holding penalty on the ensuing kickoff. But the first 40-plus yard chunk play to Cameron Coleman would be completed from 46 yards out, despite them being back on the 7-yard line. I'm like, damn, I thought they were just going to run to give themselves some space. No, they're dialing up a fucking shot play inside their own 10-yard line. It's pretty ballsy. But Arnold would go with back-to-back incompletions before doing what he does best in scrambling on a broken down play to pick up the first down. Now, they would be stalled out in this situation, although they would get inside Oklahoma's 10-yard line, but they had to settle for a field goal. And yeah, this kicker, Alex McPherson, was in a very interesting spot. Now, I did see a video, or at least a title of a video before the game, detailing that he had gone through some kind of condition and overcame it to now play on this team once again. And I was figuring what was going on. And all of a sudden, I see that this man, because they talk about it on the broadcast, was dealing with ulcerative colitis last season. So it took him out of football, and they were showing images and everything of him in the hospital, him with the condition. And I'm like, oh my fucking goodness. And he worked his way back from that. They said he lost a tremendous amount of weight and had to put it back on to get in healthy condition. I'm like, damn, what the fuck? But I tell you, he did it. And he did his job on this play. So you have to give a massive amount of respect to that. 100%. I mean, like, wow. You know what I'm saying? Auburn's defense wasn't too bad in this game either. But again, Oklahoma's was on a completely different level. Like, yeah, Auburn was getting stops and forcing 3 and outs of their own. But they were literally doing everything they could to Jackson Arnold on the Oklahoma side. As they stated at multiple points, it wasn't all just straight up blitz. No, they were timing up their pressures perfectly. They were exploiting different rushing lanes. They were doing a great job of making sure that they could get coverage sacks with how their D-backs were holding up on the back end. Outside of Guillory, because Guillory, whenever he specifically was guarding somebody, or Cam Coleman in this situation, yeah, he was a fucking con. I don't get what the hell was going on with him. They would just go at him at will, but we'll get to that later. Nonetheless, another Arnold sack would eventually lead to another 3 and out for Auburn. Now, while they would get a solid run to start, the Sooners would also be forced to punt as well. But they would be very fortunate with a lot of the shit that happened next. A lot of stuff. It all starts with Auburn getting yet another 40-plus yard completion to Cam Coleman, this time backed up on their 3-yard line and for a 40-yard gain down the field with Guillory guarding him in this situation. Now you're thinking that with a start to a drive like that, you damn near replicated it on the drive before. You're thinking that you could at least get some kind of score out of this, get in plus territory. Instead, they played some of the worst football in just a tiny sequence they possibly could have. Not only did Jackson Arnold miss the pass to Horatio Fields, but in a similar way that Texas Tech earlier in the Utah game struggled to be disciplined with all these false start penalties and shit. The Auburn squad would try to one-up that by not only getting back-to-back false start penalties on this drive, then getting an automatic first down with a horse collar tackle because Arnold was sliding, but Jones grabbed the back of his jersey. Like that I could understand. It looked weird, but I got it. The 2 straight false start penalties, an offensive holding penalty, another sack by a big stone in the middle of the fucking defensive line, an incomplete pass, and then a delay of game followed by a no-yard gain on 3rd and 33. So you get all the way down there with a chance to extend the drive to plus territory and score, and not only do you get yet another shot at an automatic first down, but you lose 19 yards in essence. And oh yeah, it got worse. Because a bad snap apparently turned into a situation where the punter got so fucking scared of an incoming Oklahoma gunner that he just decided to take the ball and run it, losing 12 yards on the play. So you get a dynamic play to Cam Coleman like that, and you get multiple penalties that not only derail the drive, you get a sack that derails the drive. You can't push the ball down the field at all, and you lose, in essence, 31 yards in just one drive, giving Oklahoma a grand opportunity to get a touchdown and take the lead. Great work by Hugh Freeze in that unit, because that's a combination of bad coaching and bad execution. There is just no excuse in that kind of situation. Oh, it would get even worse. You want to talk about lack of discipline. I mean, they were still doing their greatest job to stop the running backs in this situation for Oklahoma. But for whatever reason, these people did not know that you had to get fucking set for the next play following a stop. Because tell me why. I guess a substitution was going down here. But as Oklahoma's offense is setting up, Satania looks as though he's going to sub out of the game. All right, so he's just standing over to the sideline, talking to his coach. He's still in the game. He's not taking a step off of the field at this point. Meanwhile, Auburn's defense, I don't know what was going on. Maybe they were trying to talk to their unit, get themselves in a specific formation, figure out what assignment everybody had. And so they were talking to each other. You had a cornerback, in fact, go out to the left side of the field and I guess try to account for Satania the third, but he didn't really bother to go all the way over there. In Satania the third at this point, as the play clock is winding down, as they're about to call the play, is still wide open, doing his thing, talking to the coach on the sideline. Oklahoma snaps it. Satania the third is just streaking wide open, and it is at that point that Auburn finally recognizes, hey, he's still in the field. We should be guarding him. What the hell are we doing? By that point, it was too late. Now, Matera could have simply just thrown the pass over to Satania third on platform, essentially, for a touchdown in that situation. He wanted to make things a little difficult for himself. So he throws a fucking jump pass, sort of, and slings it over to the left side of the field for a 24-yard touchdown catch by Isaiah Satania the third. Now, apparently this was illegal, and apparently Auburn was trying to call a timeout in this situation to pull off a proper substitution of their own, and also just get ready because those guys, for whatever reason, clearly weren't fucking set. But again, if you note how exactly this play came to be, you remember that Johnny Manziel and Mike McDaniel essentially pulled off a similar thing in the NFL. In one of the crazier plays you would see from the 2010s decade. And that would get called back due to penalty. Maybe that could have happened here. Maybe the refs didn't notice it. Either way, I guess Hugh Freeze was trying to get them situated. But they got to situate themselves out there in that field. That is just terrible discipline. In an ode to fucking Manziel, they pulled that shit off. I'm like, cry harder. You weren't ready for it. You had to be ready for something of that sort. Or just actually get fucking set on defense to prevent something like that from happening. Don't try to cry to the refs about, oh, let's try to call a timeout. No. Should have been way quicker than that. Oklahoma gamed it. So the instincts were truly on 99 there. As for Auburn, following that, the woes for Jackson Arnold would continue. And again, this was a balance of stuff, okay? Because the offensive line play for Auburn was poor. When you look at the run blocking for them, when you look at the pass protection, because the fact that they could get back there, everybody on that front seven, on so many times, not just with pressures, but with TFLs and obviously with sacks, man, that reflects poorly on them. But at the same time, Arnold, in some situations, had open men. He had open people. And he would just hold on to the ball for so long, staring people down, and just get completely blown up. We'll get to that too. Oh my goodness. But anyways, the Auburn defense would get a little bit of a break with a chance for Oklahoma to bring this into a double possession lead. They would get a great pass down the field. Mateer to Lewis for 19 yards after one by Satania III for 29 yards. Got absolutely lit up by the defender on this play. But hey, he fucking hauled it in. So you gotta respect that. But whenever you get yourself into a read option situation and you fumble like that, it always hurts. And that is exactly what would happen to the Sooners here. The Tigers would get the ball back. But still, nothing panned out. Because Jackson and then Lewis and Jackson would get sacks on back-to-back plays. Even as Eric Singleton Jr. would get involved for one of the first times in this ball game, that didn't fucking matter. Mateer would be forced to punt after back-to-back incompletions. But Auburn would respond well. You know, they did a better job of protecting Jackson Arnold, and in this situation, he took full advantage of it. Singleton Jr. got another tone-setting catch for them to start out this drive, and Austin would get a 15-yard run before they would drop down further and further. And again, Arnold at this point trusting in Cam Coleman mightily against fucking Guillory. Just threw it up to him with a little bit of fade. Coleman mossed the shit out of him. Gets in for a 2-yard touchdown catch. By this time, he had 88 yards in the game. And McPherson would once again bang in the extra point for them. Essentially ending off the half right there. Oklahoma would have a possession, but they wouldn't do much. Had a tremendous chance to start off the third quarter well. But, again, with an inability to truly establish dominance in their rushing attack outside of Mateer at the moment, they were forced to punt yet again. Oh, boy. Now, this is the thing. Jackson Arnold is clearly a right-handed quarterback. So I get that he cannot see his blind side. But this sack encapsulated the game in full. Or at least partially with what would happen later. But this was a loud statement by this Oklahoma defense. And just a very bad look for that offensive line and Jackson Arnold combined. Because not only would R. Mason Thomas, one of the better defenders on that unit and one of the better ones in the nation, not only would he break free off of the left side of the O-line, just work his man completely into the abyss and get right past him to try to rush Arnold around the edge. He rung Jackson Arnold's bells from behind. Rung them. And I'm shocked that Arnold held onto the ball in this situation. But that was part of it too. I shit you not. He has a fucking drag route open. He has the running back out of the backfield. He's staring these niggas down, and he is holding onto the ball with all his might, struggling to make a decision. And Thomas don't give a fuck about. He just crashed right in and fucked him up with ease in the backfield. Like, you just don't make the job easier on yourself in that situation. Like, yes, the offensive line can't get beat. But at the same time, you had decisions to make. You had options there. And even if you didn't want to do that, guess what? You have to feel that coming. You have to feel that coming. You've got to use your peripheral vision in that situation or something. Because a play like that should never be going down. If you were truly doing everything it was you were supposed to do as a quarterback in that situation. Got them way behind the sticks, and Oklahoma will force yet another 3-and-out on them. Now, with K-Nat getting his first catch of the game, and a few situations where they just chipped away a few pieces of yards, rather, it looked as though Oklahoma could actually manage a touchdown drive here. Barnes as well, though. Again, not a player that had done much in this game out of the backfield, but they tried to get him a pass here. Now, I will say that Mateer has got to keep that ball parallel to the ground. The pass should not have been anywhere up in the air because Barnes is obviously not that tall of a person. He might not even be a receiving back, so he's not going to be able to field that catch. But at the same time, with as open as Barnes was, because Mateer had done a nice job of improvising, bringing down the linebacker who was supposed to be watching Barnes out of the backfield to account for the run. And it damn near opened up a touchdown pass if he would have caught it. But he dropped it. Now, again, just another situation where it's like, why are we not getting anything out of this running back core today? But again, once more, gotta be a little bit of a better pass. Fair. Still, Oklahoma would get on the board with a field goal. More of the same would happen for Auburn because yet another delay of game would take place. And still, they forced the 3-and-out anyways. Now, they would get a great 44-yard run from Cobb, easily their best one of the day, and in that case, they had negative rushing yards to that point. Again, largely in part thanks to the fucking just bobbled snap in negative punt. But they would make a really interesting choice on fourth down because I suppose that they don't really want McPherson taking deep kicks. He might not be a power kicker. They might have him in more for accuracy. So they bring in this other kicker who I guess has a more powerful leg. And not only does the kick from 50 yards not even reach the distance, but the accuracy was so far off. And it's like, damn, you were much better off just trying it with McPherson at that point. That would come back to bite them in the ass. It truly would. I mean, yes, for a while, although Burks and Satania III were continuing to make their marks on this game on the outside, Oklahoma once more have to settle for a field goal. And I mean, hey, you did have the Tigers respond with a touchdown of their own, as Alston would, on multiple occasions, pick up first downs for them, while Jackson Arnold, when it came down to a 4th and 11, would take full advantage of the wide open rushing lane in the middle of the field and pick up a first down before even being touched by the defense. Then, with them getting further down into the red zone, they would have multiple shots at a 4th down, and once more, they threw the ball Guillory's way, completely interfered with the pass for some reason as Coleman was trying to go up and grab it. But Simmons would punch it in from 4 yards out to give them a lead. Yet, with no time wasted, it would take just 2 minutes and 14 seconds, in fact, Oklahoma would get it all back very quickly. This was yet another beautiful pass from Mateer to Satania III, trailing all the way over on the sideline. And they got to check and see if this is a catch. It obviously was. Satania III gets it right in the breadbasket, gets the foot down, and picks up a 31-yard gain to get them inside Auburn's 10. From there, it was going to be easy for John Mateer to extend the play and scramble all the way over to the right for a 9-yard rushing touchdown. This is exactly what he would do to give them a 22-17 lead. They would miss the 2-point conversion. No worries. No worries. Penalties would continue to be the undoing of this Auburn squad. I mean, it didn't help that they had an illegal blindside block to start out the drive. And although they would pick a first down up with Horatio Fields anyways, it would still be moved back with an offensive holding penalty, a false start penalty, to get them all the way back to the 8-yard line. Then you get back-to-back sacks by Halton and then by none other than R. Mason Thomas, who would not only set school history by making that play, but it would also turn into a safety for Oklahoma. And thus, the game would end with a 24-17 win in Oklahoma's favor. Truly dominant performance from this defense. So before I even get into the offensive numbers, I've just got to relay that over. Again, yeah, Mateer definitely had some situations where they pressured him well and where he struggled to have a little bit of accuracy every now and then. But at the same time, Auburn's defense was only able to force one sack on him. You want to know how many sacks Oklahoma forced in this game? They forced a school record 10 sacks in 14 TFLs on Auburn's offense in this damn game alone. And not only that, when you look at how many people accounted for that, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 different defenders with at least a half sack in this game. It was truly everybody on that front seven making life a living hell for Jackson Arnold in this damn game. And in a game that was this close, that ended up making all the difference. I'm going to move on to some of the offensive numbers. Mateer continues to further his Heisman candidacy, getting 2 total touchdowns with 1 rushing and 1 passing. Apparently, it's the 10th straight game in which he has at least 1 of each. He also had 300 total yards on 66.7% completion. As for Satania III, what a fucking game. 9 receptions for 127 yards and a touchdown, while Kanak had 62 receiving yards on 4 catches. As for Auburn, Jackson Arnold had 65.6% completion and 220 passing yards with a touchdown. But again, with some of the poor decision making, it could have been way better than this. As for Auburn's rushing attack, that was not really in the cards for either squad. I mean, when you look at it, the teams would dead ass combined. Think about this. Try this on for size. Rushed a combined 60 times for a combined 102 rushing yards. So yeah, you were definitely not getting that in this ballgame. But again, it just seemed to affect Auburn way worse. Coleman would retain the 88 yards on 3 catches with a touchdown. I don't know why he didn't really end up with a catch in the second half. But again, there were plays in which they went for him. Defense was just trying their hardest not to ensure that he did any more damage to them, honestly. I mean, I mentioned how many times Guillory was in the middle of fucking penalties trying to guard the dude. So, that is what it is. As for Eric Singleton Jr., the Georgia Tech transfer, he would have 60 receiving yards on 9 catches. Just a crazy performance by the Sooners in this one. And again, they have a legitimate shot at contending for the SEC Conference Championship if they keep this up. They've got a pretty sizable schedule ahead of them, obviously, when we talk about SEC competition. But at the same time, if their defense is playing like that, as lights out as they did, they're always going to have a chance. And I mean, they get a pretty solid tune-up game next week before coming back into the heated battles between all of this SEC competition. So they're definitely going to be 5-0 by around this same time next week. No question about it. All right. Moving on to A-State and Baylor later on in the night. Man, both of these defenses have been so vaunted coming into this game that honestly, although both of their offenses can be really explosive, it was going to come down to who could make the more timely defensive plays in this one. And I mean, shit, that would happen right off the gate. You know, Robertson had completed like 7 of his first 9 passes or something like that, including a couple here to start off this first drive. But the second that Cameron tries to extend the fucking play, number 5 on the Arizona State defense, I guess this is Wilson, would quite literally punch the ball out of his hands. Get the ball right back and give Arizona State great field position to work with. In just one fell swoop, Arizona State was now going to have a chance to drive down the field and get themselves on the board first. Yet clearly, with the way that it was looking to start this out, they did not trust Sam Leavitt enough to throw the ball earlier in this game. Yeah, he did have a few pass attempts, but they all ended up incomplete. A lot of these plays were run after run after run, and I understand it. When you have Brown and Udo doing what they've done as a unit this season, and you have Leavitt's propensity to scramble all the time, you're naturally going to want to assert yourself in that way throughout the game. But at the same time, in a 3rd and long situation, when you've got to complete a pass, you'd think that he'd be able to make it happen, especially when throwing the ball Jordan Tyson's way. And oh my goodness, all I got to say about that is that prior to a certain point in the 4th quarter, which I'll eventually get to, Tyson was limited mightily in this one. Just keep that in mind. But they will get on the board with a field goal, though. As for the Baylor offense, Bryson Washington would get a decent run to start out this drive. You would also have Robertson get multiple passes completed to both Trigg and Prentice before having to settle for a 53-yard field goal. Now, the Sun Devils, although they got a nice first down run from Brown yet again, and another solid game back-to-back to Harple this time, they would once more have to settle for a punt. Baylor found themselves in an interesting spot, though. I mean, Washington did get a nice 3rd down conversion for 15 yards on their ensuing possession, but I don't really get the vision of them going for it on 4th and 2 in Arizona State's 17-yard line. All you had to do was take your points. And yet they could have called, they ended up calling the worst play imaginable in this situation. I'm like, why? What the hell are you doing? Like, Robinson on this situation, one of their better cover corners for Arizona State, played Wilson as perfectly as he could have. Jammed it up completely. Had no shot of being completed. But yet they were willing to do it anyways. And right after that failed attempt, Arizona State would drive right down and get themselves on the board. There would Jordan Tyson appear for a first down catch. And you'd obviously still have Sam Leavitt go out and get a few big gains of his own. They're going to put out a graphic calling him Scrambling Sam. Well, yeah, we know he likes to scramble. If you watched any Arizona State ball last season, you understand how much he loves to scramble around on the field. This is obvious. Like, it ain't nothing wrong with it, but it's like, damn, what did you expect, bro? Mateer, their tight end, would get a solid 8-yard catch to pick up 3rd down on Baylor's 1-yard line. And then from there, Sam Leavitt would get in on a solid QB sneak, get the Sun Devils a 10-3 lead. At least the Bears rather, you'd say they moved with a sense of urgency, though. Because you would have Cameron on this play right here, get a 23-yard gain, and you would also have them drop all the way down the field, pulling out an RPO play for this same Wilson character from 8 yards out for a touchdown of their own to tie up the game. Both teams would follow those drives up with ensuing punts before essentially ending off the half that way. Now, to start off the third quarter, Arizona State would punt despite picking up a first down with McClain's catch here. But they would force yet another unfortunate fumble, as Cameron would be the victim once more. And Fiaso would manage to recover this one, giving them a grand chance at scoring a touchdown rather than just settling for a field goal in theory. And yet, they literally could not overcome the goal line stand from this Bears defense. So once more, despite them being in an unfavorable position, Baylor would hold. They would hold and managed to give up just a field goal. But it was bad for the Baylor offense for quite some time. I mean, they punt right here, go 3 and out, and then they damn near find themselves in a spot where they break on defense. Because at this point, the Sun Devils are driving once again, chipping away with short play after short play before getting a 15-yard gain to Mateer, and then another 17-yard catch in the mix to Eusebio. But on 4th and 1, on their own 16-yard line, once more, they held strong. They gave the ball to Udo, and again, similar situation, might have took the wrong gap, but regardless, they swarmed that area. They made sure that he didn't do anything to try to extend over the line of game, and he would be stopped for a no gain, giving them a first down and the ball back. And just when you're thinking that Baylor could pay it forward, though, Robertson, despite him being mostly in tune in this game and not wholly mistake-free, there were some overthrows, of course, but he had done a solid job of protecting the ball. Not here. Because as I get back in here and see what's going on, you have Abney II crash in for a fucking lurk of hell to get the Sun Devils the ball back. Yet still, when you can linger in a game for that long, even though the opposing team might have a little momentum, it's always going to come with an asterisk. I mean, Leavitt, for crying out loud, did have 27-yard gain to start off this drive with a run, because of course he did. But that would then be overturned slightly with a little bit of a gaffe. I guess he was trying to extend a blown-up QB draw, QB run play, and he slipped in the backfield to lose 7 yards. Interesting. Regardless, they would get another field goal from Gomez Juarez in this game to give themselves a 6-point lead. Now the Baylor offense wanted to wake up a little bit. I mean, it would go slowly, and they did have to overcome multiple 4th downs to extend this drive, but they got it done. First, it was Trigg picking up 16 yards to give them more life. And then, even though on 4th and 1, you're thinking that Arizona State can hold because they had done a decent job on Bryson Washington all night, he would break loose with all strength possible for a 41-yard gain up the gut of the field to get them down on the goal line, essentially. And from there, Robertson would then try to attempt to pass over to Trigg on an RPO play. Now, this Trigg character is just pretty fucking interesting. I mean, the entire defense is doing as best as they can to tackle him. But he took all those shots and ate them. Because even though he was getting pushed back, he still extended his arm out completely and got the ball over the goal line for a touchdown to give Baylor a 1-point lead. Yet, when the Sun Devils needed him the most. Jordan Tyson eventually came into the fray. But first, it was Leavitt on 3rd down and 13, getting a good seam route over to Eusebio with a linebacker just completely distracted as he's supposed to be watching that area of the field, breaks open completely for 61-yard gain, and he's sprinting down the field, but he's eventually tackled. Then Brown gets them even closer into territory before Jordan Tyson would be given his shot on a 2nd and 13. Leavitt threw this ball with elite anticipation, essentially a deep corner out route in that kind of sense. And if he throws that much later, it is likely going to be deflected or intercepted. But with the timing being as perfect as it was, Tyson could high point the ball and make the extra effort to get in the end zone for a touchdown, but also get the 2-point conversion just as well to make it even more difficult on Baylor's offense. But they responded. They were locked in down the stretch. They managed to get a great return, and then you also had Brown in this situation out of the trips formation pick up a great 23-yard gain. You also had them go back to Michael Trigg, and he's just kind of delaying his route a little bit, trying to gauge what Robertson's going to do with the ball. Robertson locates him, and Trigg just bullies the defense all the way into the end zone, essentially, getting a 33-yard touchdown and tying up the game. If Arizona State wanted to come out with a win, they're going to have to put together a money drive. And while Tyson could, in theory, be his time, he did end up with a catch on this drive. But at the same time, again, with how things have gone for them previously, maybe they felt that they just wanted to keep the ball out of harm's way. So they went right down to running the ball. They were already in Baylor territory at the point, so you're trying to make them waste their timeouts, burn all of their different resources, and just continue to take time off instead of bailing them out with potential incomplete passes and just negative plays. The run had been working well for you all night long. So it would be remiss if you just didn't stick to that when it counted the most. This would make the field goal for Gomez Suarez a little easier, and he would eventually kick the game-winning 43-yard field goal to give Arizona State a 27-24 win over Baylor in this one. As for the numbers here, we have Leavitt get 221 yards through the air with a touchdown pass and a touchdown run with 62 yards on the ground. As for Brown, he had 80 rushing yards on 21 carries. As for Eusebio, he had 78 receiving yards on 2 catches. Mateo had 55 receiving yards on 6 catches. And Tyson had 43 yards receiving on 7 catches and a touchdown. Now again, 5 catches for 21 yards before those couple of plays in the fourth quarter. But again, when it was time for him to make the play, he did that. Still, it broke his streak of consecutive games with at least 60 receiving yards. So that's definitely kind of tough. But I would think that he'd much rather take the win. As for the Bears, Sawyer Robinson had 3 touchdowns passing and an interception with 250 yards through the air. Bryson Washington had 111 rushing yards on 17 carries. Michael Trigg had 71 receiving yards and 2 touchdowns on 5 catches. Cameron had 65 receiving yards on 6 catches. And Kobe Prentice had 45 receiving yards on 5 catches. And to move on to number 9 Illinois versus number 19 Indiana. Oh my gosh. Yo, I'm not even gonna lie to you. Oh boy. Okay, this is just, oh man. All right. This is going to be interesting to admit. And I'll get to the overall scope of things in just a second. This might have been Fernando Mendoza V's finest game of his college football career. Is that really a stretch to say at this point? I don't think it is. I have never seen him put on that kind of performance against that kind of football team. Even when he was at Cal for all that time, was constantly just putting up some more of the underwhelming performances for any college quarterback at that time. And yet, this game right here just continued a tear that he's been on over the past two. Now, yeah, Indiana did start out the season not playing the best competition, and they played Indiana State last week. But for him, in this stretch, just think about how insane this fucking sounds. 40 of 43 passing in the last 2 weeks, and 10 touchdown passes. He has likely, with a performance like this, and I wouldn't be surprised to see it, is a headline mentioning that some people are catching up in odds with Mateer in terms of the Heisman watch. I wouldn't be shocked if Mendoza V is one of those names at this point. It's absolutely insane. I just did not see this coming whatsoever. But they quite literally just went ballistic on this Illinois defense. And again, I think coming into this game, they've been one of the top ones in this. Yet the first touchdown drive that he goes on, again, just Tommy reads, making quick decisions, just like that. He was getting a good balance of Tom from the offensive line, and that makes sense. But again, compared to what guys like Jackson Arnold were doing, compared to what Baron Morton was doing earlier in the Utah game, and also looking at what Altmaier did in this very game, when you can make quick reads like that and bail out your offensive line time and time again to make the job mutually easier on each other, that's always going to pay dividends for the team as a whole. So, of course, when he gets these back-to-back dimes of passes to Omar Cooper Jr. for 39 yards and then an 11-yard touchdown catch, shouldn't come as a surprise. Or, on this next touchdown drive, just gets a good dump-off out of the backfield to Hemby, who is a transfer from Maryland, interestingly enough. And he worked in the system perfectly. You just get out of the backfield and give Mendoza V an outlet to work with. And all of a sudden, a short yard gain turns into a 26-yard catch and run. Then Mendoza fires a pass over to Williams for an 11-yard touchdown catch. All of a sudden, at this point, the Hoosiers are up 21-7, but it just keeps on going. They must be glad to have Elijah Surratt back. One of their better wide receivers, I think he was out for some time. They're glad to have him back, truly. But it would be a different player in Nowakowski, their tight end, getting a pretty sneaky fucking tight end screen. And yet, the blocking was immaculate. You have 3 different linemen, all out in front of Nowakowski in the center. And they just part the seas so fucking well. They all disperse out and knock off one Illinois defender after another, giving Nowakowski the perfect lane to just run through, essentially untouched, for what would turn into a 43-yard touchdown. Great play call, great execution, and it just keeps the Hoosiers' offense firing. But it wouldn't stop by the end of this first half because Surratt would fittingly get in for a 9-yard touchdown catch of his own. Now, at this point, I really didn't have much else to add about Indiana in this game. They were just doing everything well. The rushing would take over completely. I mean, yes, Mendoza was having an immaculate game passing. But when you can have that kind of balanced attack to where you're that dominant on the ground, and I'm going to get to the numbers in a second. You're going to see exactly what the hell I'm talking about if you haven't already. Man, they just completely own this Illinois team. And I mean, people were questioning why Illinois was ranked highly in the first place in the preseason poll. Now, granted, with the roster that they had, it was well deserved, but I ain't gonna lie, a game like this against an Indiana team that is deemed to be somewhat inferior coming into this game would make you question every fucking. At the same time, as they continue to pour it on with Surratt getting another touchdown here, we would enter the Mendoza verse. Because you see, Mendoza is not the only Mendoza on the Hoosiers football team. Backing him up at the quarterback position is a freshman by the name of Alberto Mendoza, his brother, who would then be substituted in the game after they took Fernando out. And I was saying, hey, let him complete a pass. Let him get a touchdown pass in the game. Wouldn't that be crazy that a pair of brothers gets on the field in one night and can both score touchdowns? It would be pretty fucking crazy. They just decided to continue trucking through this Illinois defense. They didn't really let them pass the ball all that much. But granted, when you can consistently get gains of 12, 9, 7, 8, 17, and then 8 for a touchdown, you really don't have to throw the ball at that point if you're averaging damn near a first down a carry on a drive alone. To add even more insult to injury, Illinois' backup quarterback would be intercepted, and thus the torture would end for Illinois as they would lose 63-10 last night. And yet this was slated to be a primetime game. Not only that, there is historical significance because this was the first time that these two people, out of all the years that they've played each other in the Big Ten, this is the first time since 1950 that it comes in the form of a ranked matchup. And Indiana absolutely dogged them in this one. Without a shadow of doubt. I mean, goodness gracious. I just got to get into the numbers, and then I can give some insight on how Illinois did. If that even says much for them. But as for Indiana, like I said, Mendoza V, game of his fucking life. 5 touchdown passes, just 2 incompletions. 91.3% accuracy in this game in 267 passing yards. Elite work. Surratt had 92 receiving yards and 9 catches with 2 touchdowns, while Cooper Jr. had a touchdown catch on 78 yards and 6 receptions. Hemby had 2 receptions for 37 yards, and Williams Jr. had 17 yards on 3 catches with a touchdown. Now, yeah, you could normally question just 5 people catching passes in a game. But again, at the same time, if you're going to be that efficient, well, there ain't nothing wrong with that. But as for their rushing, this is where we get into the real meat of the game right here. As a unit, they had 3 different rushers tally over 65 rushing yards. And as a team, they had 312 yards on the ground with 6.4 yards per carry in 3 touchdown runs. You want to know how many rushing yards that Illinois had in this game, the Fighting Illini, yeah? They had just 2 rushing yards as a team. That is not a typo. Not a typo whatsoever. 2.1 yards per carry. For as dominant as the offense was, when you look at the defense and how they made Illinois look completely inferior, you also have to give them massive credit. And it's crazy as hell to think that, again, Oklahoma did what they did to Auburn, literally the game before this kicked off the slot. You say, you know, we're going to try to one-up that. We're going to sack Altmaier 7 different times. We're going to pressure him however many more times, and we're going to speed him up. Make him as uncomfortable as possible. That's exactly what they did. Outside of one play in this first quarter where he got a beautiful pass over to Colin Dixon, like a slot post for 59 yards and a touchdown catch for him, which would be their only touchdown of the night. Nothing great came out of this game for that Illinois offense. Again, the fact that you couldn't establish the run hurt, and Altmaier is a quarterback that's going to be as dependent on that working. With that not happening, while he was able to settle down and make a few timely reads, again, he always felt some hesitancy because nothing was there. Also, too, whenever Illinois did establish some good fortune for themselves, it was always followed up by something negative. Like the fact that you did force a 3-and-out on their very first drive, only to follow that up with a possession that lost yardage and a blocked punt that would be recovered by one of the JMU transfers in Pond for a touchdown to get them started in this game. At that point, you already knew it was going to go bad for you in that situation. I mean, my goodness. And again, similar case, I would say, like, the offensive line execution, I would say, especially more so on run blocking, was poor. I mean, yeah, as a running back, you've got to have elite ball carrier vision to get through some of these gaps. But at the same time, you did not do a great enough job creating rushing lanes for these people to get through. You made it so easy for that front seven to overpower you and dominate you. And the score represents that perfectly. The one saving grace that they can take away from this game is that it did not take place in Illinois. You know, this game was played in Bloomington, in Indiana's home. If you had to subject your fans to something like that, oh boy, I couldn't even fathom how they would be feeling today. They're already feeling bad as it is. They have to watch that shit in person. Oh my gosh. They probably would not want to be heard from for quite some time. Now again, it will certainly hurt Illinois. I'd imagine it would. Because there just seem to be levels to this shit, man. There is... Oh, that's tough. In fact, things got so bad for them that is the most points that an AP top 25 team has ever scored against a Big Ten school. And yet, this is a conference game, with the margin of victory being completely in the favor of Indiana in this case. It's just absolutely embarrassing stuff. And still, one could argue that they did not have the most, well, I ain't gonna lie. It is a very embarrassing loss. It is hard to top getting smoked by 53 points. But there were a few losses across college football that you could argue were a bit more embarrassing. It doesn't get any easier for them though. USC watched a little bit of that game against Michigan State. Just beat them 45-31 in a shootout, and now they're coming in as a top-ranked school facing off against you in Illinois next week. You got to find a way to bounce back. There's no excuse. There's no excuse. As a team, this was a collective and loud L that you have to shake back from. And if you can't do it, man, oh man. All right, that'll do it for the game action. Now, I guess I won't go too much in depth. But, again, like I said, there were a few embarrassing losses here. For instance, Oklahoma State lost to Tulsa 19-12 on Friday. Clemson, in a game that you would probably desperately need to win in their situation, after Dabo Swinney talked all that shit, fucked around and lost to Fran Brown in the Syracuse squad 34-21 yesterday. UCF beat North Carolina 34-9. Washington State has fallen off such a fucking cliff. I don't know what happened to them. But I think, again, I mean, it's obvious that losing Mateer would tremendously hurt because I don't know what their quarterback play is on right now. But in a game that would usually be a shootout in Pac-12 football turned into the Big Ten Washington school, shutting down Washington State 59-24 in the 7:30 slot last night. Florida State continues to keep rolling, though. And the fact that they face off against the Miami, Florida team, who also beat Florida 26-7 last night, is going to be absolutely wild. But as for this Florida team, just to follow shit up, you thought it was bad for fucking... oh my goodness, man. Boy. They just struggled. They struggled yet again. And like I figured, Lagway was going to continue to be as passive as possible. 2.7 yards per pass attempt. And around 5 yards per completion. He had a few moments where he tried to make the superstar play, but realistically, again, he was just trying to do as best as he could to not turn the ball over like he was in the last game. And that combined with him playing a little scared, which you can never do in as hostile of an environment as that can be. I mean, they were playing in Hard Rock Stadium. And you knew the home field advantage was going to be there for them. That only amplified with your play. I don't know. Again, I don't know what that means for Napier. But again, we are in this fucking spot again. And it doesn't get any easier, man. It just doesn't. So, I mean, again, obviously, there's a lot more that goes into it. But some might have to give at some point. I don't know. Although I wasn't going to do much talking about this game at all. Wasn't one of the ones that I was going to focus on covering. Nebraska-Michigan game would actually turn out to be pretty interesting. But Michigan, behind a shit ton of rushing yards, including 149 from Justice Haynes, would manage to win 30-27, despite Nebraska, at the end of the first half, that is, getting a fucking Hail Mary to go. Yeah, wild performance. North Texas would beat Army in overtime. So, just think about this for a second. The K-State squad would lose to the same Army team that lost to Tarleton State earlier in the season and now lost to the Mean Green in overtime. Just makes that loss look exponentially worse on the weekly. I mean, that is just so embarrassing. Arkansas should be in a pretty interesting spot next week because there is just no way they found themselves in that position again. No way. Now, Green had a poor performance in this one, but the reality is that they were in a position to go down the field and get another game-winning score of some kind. It already hurt that they gave up the long rushing touchdown to Memphis's running back on the drive before, but they had a chance to correct that wrong. And yet, again, for the second straight week in a row, one of their running backs fumbles in opponent territory to give away the game, essentially. They are very much in desperation right now. And it does hurt them that they're going to be getting into a pretty intriguing game against a ranked Notre Dame team that just smacked Purdue yesterday, as they should, although they gave up 30 points for some reason. Very questionable defense. You know they're going to be playing to protect a season where they need to run the table to do much of anything at this point, even though they are still in the top 25. I don't know how much better it gets for Arkansas, but they got to come correct, man. Because that shit is sickening. Sickening, dude. There is no way. Mississippi State beat the hell out of Northern Illinois. I would have to imagine again, following the headline from last week, I'd have to imagine that they would be ranked within the top 25 at some point. Carolina's California rather, their perfect start to the season would end mightily. Hey, I mean, I've been hyping up Jaron Callaway, Saga Politelli, but at the end of the day, this was a game that was probably due to happen for him. Doesn't look like he played all the best in this one. 44.7% completion and 2 interceptions with 208 passing yards, while getting completely shut out by San Diego State 34-0. Absolutely rough one. And if anything, it just shows that, hey, he has got a lot more to learn, so I won't make the most about it. But if it does become a pattern, there could be an issue there. Nevertheless, they've already exceeded expectations as a team. So it shouldn't be anything that they're too mad about, I should say. For whatever reason, San Jose State got into a shootout with Idaho and barely won. Virginia Tech would win 38-6 after firing Brent Prod this week. Oh yeah, note Deshaun Foster of the Bruins squad also got fired this week. And, I mean, hey, they didn't end up playing. So I guess it was kind of the perfect time to just get a bye week. Try as best as they can to settle into a new staff. Find a coach in the first place and go from there. So that is it for all the game action, but there would be a major piece of news that would come out regarding the transfer portal. There would be multiple reports stating that the spring transfer portal window would be officially removed as a part of a new proposal that they passed recently. And at the same time, they were also, as a committee, contemplating making alterations to the winter transfer portal window as well. It makes a tremendous amount of sense in both ways. Because again, at that point, when you get the load of recruits that you have in the winter, you have to question at times with that kind of system in place. You have to question whether or not they can actually live up to their potential as a part of your team. And if not, I guess coaches would use that as a sort of cushion, a back-end sort of auxiliary context to acquire even more talent over the course of a few days, from what I understand. And naturally, that could give certain teams an unfair advantage when it comes to roster construction. I mean, you know, it does make a ton of sense, though. Like, quite literally. Because at that point, once you've set up your roster in the winter and you go out and prepare for the spring, in theory, you've got what you've got, and you've got to deal with that. So no longer should you be able, barring other situations that might, live outside of these specific guidelines, no longer should you be able to operate in such a way with how you create a team. Simply put. Now, from what I understand, apparently according to these articles right here, they mention this idea that like the initial windows started out with a massive amount of space. And as years went on, as they tried to hash out some more things, number of days for each transfer portal window decreased and decreased. This winter one, if that passed along with this approval of the ban on the spring transfer window, it probably would be at around 9 days. They said like January 2nd to January 11th. And I don't know, because that would still, even though it's not going to be in December, even though everyone was clamoring, apparently, as the CBS Sports article outlines, everybody was clamoring about this idea that they would want a January one. Like, that's still going to conflict heavily with the postseason action. As this quote states right here from the CBS Sports article, it was particularly difficult for teams involved in college football playoff prep. Last year, the winter portal window ran from December 9th to 28th. The first round of playoff games occurred on December 20th and 21st. That meant teams in the playoffs had to juggle roster retention, a signing period, portal visits, and playoff prep. End quote. That was incredibly ridiculous. And again, how many fucking times did we see multiple players? And again, when we look at that Marshall situation, that disgusting ass Marshall situation, the swarm of the fucking team left before they were obligated to play their fucking bowl game, to where Marshall had to cancel it and allow Navy to play Oklahoma in that game as a fucking result, with that being the window of time. So you can imagine that they would not want a repeat of something like that ever happening again. And that's why this would benefit coaches immensely in this situation and that kind of system, because that is just inexcusable, especially with teams that are already established to either be in bowl season or playoff season. You don't need all that extra outside noise to deal with when you're trying to prepare game by game for what could eventually be the final game of your season if you don't go out there and win. You're trying to do everything you can to make sure that you are at elite performance through training, through practicing a number of different plays from scrimmage, and etc. Like, there's no reason why all of that extra stuff should be added in there. But again, if you do that from the initial January 2nd to January 11th window that was being implemented, you'd still be dealing with the same thing, even if it's to a lesser extent. Like, yeah, most of the other teams at that point would be done with bowl season, but you still have college football action taking place. So I really don't know how much that would make sense. And again, they're thinking about making other changes to that as well and revisiting the drawing board there. But as for now, they haven't made a formal decision on that, which I can respect. That does make sense. But yeah, man, when it comes to that, continuity between rosters and head coaches would be promoted a lot more. Like, you're not just going to be able to jump ship at every single point that you feel as though you're not going to get your greatest chance with a specific team. You're going to have to be very calculated with your decision making, and swift also. Though I think they mentioned as well that there are still cases where players can transfer early when coaching changes take place. So with the Foster and Pry firings that I just mentioned, anyone on Virginia Tech or UCLA at this point could do it earlier in theory if they so choose. But outside of that, I think everything else would remain the same. And yeah, as I'm saying, player movement is definitely going to be a little tougher. That could be a very good thing. Because again, I think that this right here makes a really good point. Like, there's a note that they have. In fact, because I'm essentially about to say the same thing. There's a note that they have right here that essentially states, like, when it comes to lesser conference teams who happen to have very good and desirable players, naturally, Power 4 schools, with their overall appeal, the money that they bring in comparative to those lesser conferences and those lesser teams, will naturally sway those candidates for transfer much easier with the way that it's gone over the past year and some change. As this note states right here, this shift is a boon for Group of 6 and FCS programs whose rosters are pillaged during the spring window, as Power 4 teams would often look to their rosters late to add depth. How many quality FCS players have you seen take their talents over essentially take a chance in the transfer portal because they understand that they may not get as much exposure with those schools, and know that if they go to a bigger school, a lot more national prestige, a lot more money, and with a lot more brand exposure, generally, they can become viewed as much better prospects and get the proper eyes on them that they would need to capitalize on different NIL deals and actually make a solid college career for themselves to parlay over to the NFL. Interesting side point to that, because Ole Miss has been killing the ball game. Now, their freshman in Simmons is out with injury. And who did they substitute in against Kentucky? Trinidad Chambliss. Where did he come from? A D2 school in Ferris State. Why did he leave? You can imagine why he left. That FCS program to go to Ole Miss. And now he's actually looking like one of the better quarterbacks in that conference. Chances are that he was probably doing similar things at Ferris State, maybe to a lesser extent, with weaker competition. But he might have been balling out in a similar way. Yet, it would not be recognized like that if he was still there. At Ole Miss now, he's getting all the coverage imaginable. They had the game on ESPN against Tulane yesterday, and he went straight to work. You're going to have all the different shows talking about you in that capacity. You're going to have all the eyes on you. And with Ole Miss's roster, you're going to have a lot more scouts there anyway. They may just stumble upon looking at him and trying to evaluate him as a quarterback prospect for the future. And all because he made that decision to transfer from a D2 school over to Ole Miss. Now again, for him personally, that's a good thing. But for Ferris State, that could be viewed as a very, very bad thing. Still though, there's something to having a player being able to make that decision. But there are downsides to each aspect here. Like for one, it's been completely abused already. And also, in the event that something like this were to happen, it was only because, apparently, they figured that they might see legal action be taken against them as a result of this. As this whole quote right here states, it's understandable that the NCAA and its members would want to throttle player movement after a record-setting 4,000 plus FBS players entered the portal during the 2024-25 cycle, but it could also lead to lawsuits. A big reason why the elimination of the spring portal window was tabled last year is because the NCAA member schools were afraid a lawsuit could occur over limiting player agency and earning potential. And a loss in court could set the stage for the NCAA to lose its right to restrict player movement in any capacity. So from that perspective, they're trying to get ahead of the curve as best as they can. That still might not stop certain players or groups of teams even from taking action against them, though. If we're being honest. And that could pose a very, very large problem for them. But again, can you blame them when you see that 4,000 FBS players across all these different schools in just the cycle of 1 year moved and shifted around? You can see how that becomes a little bit of an issue from their perspective. It's like, oh my gosh, man, that is ridiculous. And then even to add even more insult to injury there, as this ESPN article states, this year more than 1,100 FBS scholarship players entered the transfer portal in the month of April. That is an absurd amount of player movement. Even if a transfer portal is supposed to promote that in theory, like, oh my gosh. Like, it just, jeez, man. And again, to know that obviously it's going to be first come, first serve, but a lot of the attention when it comes to making, putting your name in the transfer portal, you're either going to be looking at a Power 4 school, or again, looking for a better opportunity elsewhere. And in that situation, can make it a little bit centralized, which is an entirely different conversation that they will continue to need to have in the future to truly figure out this thing. Maybe there's no figuring this out ever. But you've got to consistently take those steps forward to make it happen. Nonetheless, yeah, a lawsuit is the last thing they would want. So overall, again, it is smart for them to ban the spring window. Like, man, if you're going to go out and you're going to make all these moves in the winter, man, you best recognize that, hey, this team is actually a good one. You better have faith in that. And if you don't, well, you don't. Because that is just going to make those kinds of moves all the more important. You can't just go out and play this game of pick a transfer or any transfer. No, you need to make sure that you're making the right decision at every point of time. And you will be rewarded for your hits. You'll be penalized internally for your misses. That's how it should be. Because every team is not always going to win the transfer portal. Even if you have situations where transfer classes for different teams are ranked. Like, that's just kind of bullshit. It's not going to go perfectly for every team, and it's not supposed to. And when you have all those players in there, in the mix like that, I mean, obviously with it being spread out, the odds kind of shift around a little bit. But, bruh, You've just got to understand that it should be much harder for certain teams to hit efficiently in the transfer portal than not. That's what this comes down to. That'll do it for this one. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.